Hello, beautiful people. Thank you for tuning into History with Chemistry. Today we're going to be talking about that part of history where Mexicans owned some 250,000 enslaved Africans after Spain invaded the Aztec people that were there before. Now, if you're new here, please give me a follow, subscribe below. Also, I have a TikTok and Instagram that I will be posting on. Please give me a follow on there. I support Congo with all of my proceeds, so everything you watch on my YouTube and my TikTok goes directly to Congo and Sudan. But in the meantime, let's get into it. So if you don't know already, some 12.5 million African people were transported over the Atlantic Ocean from Africa. And they were, I guess you could say, distributed to different colonies and countries. These countries included Mexico. Before I go any further, please understand that 12.5 million is a minimum. That's what was documented. There was millions of people that went undocumented. So, on with the story. From the early 1520s to the end of the Mexican War of Independence in 1810, Spain brought over some 250,000 enslaved Africans, and their descendants were also enslaved. So they only brought over 250, but if you can imagine, the number that was enslaved was exponentially higher, okay? Before Spain came there, this was a land of the Aztecs. These were very thriving people. These people that were just minding their fucking business like everyone else on this planet before white people got a hold of them. But they're here now. So at this time, there was a number of Spanish conquistadors, aka colonizers, that came to different parts of Mexico. What we know Mexico to be today, just being that one area, that was not what Mexico was. Mexico kind of, and by the way, it wasn't called Mexico, honey, okay? There was a lot of different colonies in a lot of different territories. But it took up a lot of the west coast of what we know today, California and stuff like that, and also South America. Also the Pacific Islands. Some of these colonizers from Spain actually wanted to implement a more humane way of slavery, like the Spanish leader Charles I. He brought over, yes, his own enslaved Africans, but he was a member of the Catholic Church, and he believed that if you treated them humanely, they would want to produce for you more. But although he sounds like such a sweet little master, no, he is the one that actually introduced enslaving African people to replace the population that declined in the Aztecs with African people. So just to give you a little history, a background on that, when Spain touched down in the land of the Aztecs and other areas of what we know as Mexico today, they killed off over 95% of the population with smallpox. Now, if you know anything about Spain and the Europeans, any Europeans in history, they killed off a large population of people on this globe with smallpox. So their population in Mexico, what we know to be Mexico, went from 29 million to just 1 million in a very, very short period of time. This means their economy was declining. They didn't have bodies able to work. They barely had any bodies in general. So when this European man comes down, and he's from Spain, and he has the answer, I got the fix. The fix is enslaving these black people, these African people. They'll do it for you for free. We can implement this right now. Once these Aztec people approved of enslaving African people, and they agreed to enslave African people from the years, and I'm going to look off screen numerous times because I do have notes here, because this is going to be a touchy topic that I know a lot of people are going to want facts on, okay? So from the years 1580 to 1650 was the peak. When I tell you there was sugar? There was so much sugar being mined and planted out of what we now know as Mexico. They rebuilt their economy quick off the backs of African people. Now, like I said, the Charles I leader, he did allow some African people to purchase their freedom. There was also a manumission, which is freeing the enslaved by deed or will. So, I mean, he did encourage that. So I guess you could say he was a more, forgiving master, but at the end of the day, he still enslaved African people. Let's not forget that. I want to put a picture up here. I'm going to try and zoom it out a little bit, make my head smaller up here. This is actually the population of where it started, and over time you got from 1580 to 1650, from 1650 to 1810, all the way to 2020. So a lot of Afro-Latinas and Afro-Latinos, a lot of Mexicans that come from certain parts of Mexico that look a little blacker than they do Mexican, they are probably direct descendants of slavery that happened on Mexican land. If you can imagine, the people that were already there, the indigenous people, did procreate and also marry because that was allowed under the rule of Charles the First. So they did kind of dilute that lineage, and I guess you could say now it would be kind of harder to know exactly who was a descendant of that. But if you know, you know, I guess, right? It's also important to note that during this time, the term mulatto came from the word mule, and a mule is basically a donkey and a horse mixed. Remember that. After a certain amount of time, the amount of African people that resided in this land that they now call New Spain, it was called New Spain once it was colonized, it grew rapidly, okay? Like that diagram I showed you said, by 1810, there was approximately 600,000 of them, okay? But back to the plantation. Despite the initiatives from the church, life on the plantations all around where these enslaved people lived were brutal, okay? A lot of women were raped, a lot of children were drowned, a lot of people that if you got sick, simply just a cold or something, you were murdered. You would get beaten damn near to death if you were to curse while getting whipped. It was horrible. That was until the black population of Mexico started to realize, kind of like the people in Haiti, we outnumber these motherfuckers. So a multitude of rebellions started to occur all over Mexico. Anybody that was enslaved, they was revolting and rebelling, motherfucker, okay? Listen, but they smart about it. So when they rebelled and they revolted, they didn't just, burn down the plantations and live amongst the burnt ashes. No. They went up in the hills. They went in the trees in the forest. So much so that they had a whole other population, a whole other race of people named maroon people. These maroon people lived in the forest, and they were freed people. They were people that revolted. They were people that rebelled, and their population got so big. And if you were to rebel and you were to revolt and successfully do it, you are welcomed into this maroon nation, this maroon society population up in the hills. And it wasn't like they went there and just forgot about it. No. They was ambushing people. They was ambushing trucks and ships and shit that was transporting enslaved people. No, they was getting their people the fuck out of there. It wasn't no one and done. Oh no, we coming back. After the black population had gotten so big in Africa, and now you have this large population of freed people that are willing to literally kill you if you continue to enslave my people, they had no choice but to literally give them their independence. Now, by the end of the 18th century, most of the African population in Mexico had basically gained employment, but they were mistreated and paid literally pennies. But it's better than nothing, and they're making progress. Although I'm not a person to just settle for less, you should see they're making progress now. So from 1810 to 1821, which was the end of the War of Independence, the Mexican War of Independence, these African communities and population, they kind of sided with I guess you could say the indigenous people, their compatriots, and they came together and they decided to fight Spain and get Spain out of Mexico as much as possible because it was not doing anything good for them. They were able to successfully gain their independence. I don't want to get this wrong, so excuse me if I look off the screen. They were able to gain their independence in 1821, and they became the Republic of Mexico, which abolished slavery in 1829, but that was only after slavery was abolished in Haiti. Haiti was the very first republic to ever abolish slavery in the West. And also, since then, Yanga, I'm going to read this because it's important I say it right, so excuse my accent. Yanga has been named a national hero in 1871 and has since been titled El Primer Libertador de las Americas, which means the first liberator of the Americas. I wish I could give him a hug. A lot of historians that look into Mexico kind of try to look over their African heritage and their African descent, and we all know why now. And also it's important, the country's 2020 census was the first in which Mexicans could assert their African heritage. So before 2020, you couldn't even, you didn't even have the option to say you had African lineage. It's either you Mexican, you're Spanish, or what? That's it. Mexican or Spanish. That's a shame. In the meantime, give me a follow. I do back history. I love y'all.